students. We have with us Professor Brajesh Dubey, who is going to explain why life cycle assessment is important and how can it be done. He also explains myth around sustainable alternates through life cycle assessment. He is an associate professor in waste management and sustainable engineering at IIT Kharagpur. Let's listen to him.
As well, you may have seen some like I do kind of go into a little bit big picture first, like why it just now you were having the discussion on looking at recycling, resource recovery, circular economy and all that. And in general, when we talk about environment, like what we are actually looking at, like why we are even talking about all this. So have a bit let me try to get this how to okay. This bar is kind of coming on top here, which is kind of okay. I'll try to put it back here somewhere. We'll see how it goes. Or maybe back there only is fine. Okay, let me get my laser pointer. So if you talk about this whole issue, like if you try to just look at kind of get a backup and think about that, why we are even worried about all these things. What is the ultimate goal? The ultimate goal is to kind of look at this planet, isn't it? The planet and the people living on this planet. So we have to keep this planet in such a way so that our future generations can also have a decent life, can also have all the, you can say, luxuries or all the facilities that we are enjoying today. And in fact, we would always want our next generation to have a much better life than what we had. So that's the like our human nature as well. So but the way things are happening, that's not going to happen. We are talking about climate change, we're talking about increase in the temperature, which is leading to increase in the water level and all those flooding, so your problem of extreme events like extreme weather events. So if you think about in a global on in the time, also in looking at the time, like if you're looking at a time scale, if you look at the age of this age of the earth is around 5 billion years old. Some of the newer research suggests that it is actually older than that. Now if you take that 5 billion years, 4.6 billion years, and put that on a 24-hour scale. Now why 24-hour scale? Because we are familiar with 24 hours. There is a 24 hours in a day, so we know what is, we can relate to that. So if you put that 4.6 billion years in a 24-hour scale, 1 second is equivalent to 52,000 years. So 1 second is 52,000 years. And with that time scale, and 1 hour is a 187.5 million years, if you look at the different events that has happened on this planet, it's starting from zero, which is like right after 24, is starting from zero. We have the Big Bang. Then you have from the creation of this planet all the way up to today. If you look at actually all these different events happening, then you had this like we had the oxygenation where bacteria began to grow. Then we had some plant life, then we have some insect life, then different types of animals, different species. So Homo sapiens, the modern human, if you think about that, they actually came to this planet at 23:59:56 hours. 23:59:56. That's almost like we are using the same time scale, same time like the way the time is shown in our railway timetable and all that. So 23:59:56. That means what? Only 4 seconds. So modern humans, the Homo sapiens of today, have existed on this planet for only 4 seconds. And that 4 second means 200,000 years. So we have existed on this planet for around 200,000 years, and that 200,000 years we have used so much of resources, we have created so much of waste, and we have so much of negatively impact the environment, negatively impact the ecosystem, you can say, for this Mother Earth. One thing we need to realize this that see you see there are a lot of species before us as well. So there will be a lot of species after us. We are not here on this planet forever, isn't it? So we don't know actually. So, but there were species before us which disappeared. So there is no guarantee that humans will be on this planet forever. And we also have to realize the respect for the nature, right? So some of the discussion that was happening before, that the respect for the nature is also has to be there. We saw that in last 1.5 years in this pandemic, with this tiny virus has really made so much of changes in our daily life. If you take the entire virus which is out there in the world and take a Coca-Cola can, aluminum can, and you put all these viruses in that aluminum can, you will still have around 20%. I'm talking about the normal aluminum can of 200 to 200 ml, 200 to 300 ml, and you put all the viruses there, and then you will still have 20% empty spaces. So that's the total amount of virus. It's a very not too much, but you look at the how much effect it has. So respecting nature, making sure the things work okay on the nature, and having a good harmony with nature is very, very important. And this whole concept of circular economy, life cycle, all those things actually comes from there. The basic concept, basic philosophy, or basic purpose is to really make this planet a better place to live, keep this planet as clean as possible. So that's the bottom line. So that's where we are actually coming from. So other thing in this particular planet, what has happened? Increase in population, a huge increase in population in last 200 years. So with huge increase in population, what happens? A lot of demand for resources. Now, if you have a lot of demand for resources, that will create, you will have more mining, you will have more production. Of course, the GDP numbers will go up, but at the same time, you will create a lot of waste. Now that waste, if you don't do the proper resource recovery, if you don't follow the principle of circular economy, I'm not going into detail of circular economy because I think you must have got some lectures on that in the previous module. So, but I'm assuming that you understand that. If not, we can have some discussion at the end on that too. So, but see, that's if you don't go into that particular frame of mind and the way of our day-to-day, all the different activities we do, what will happen? We'll be creating more and more and more and more of waste, do more of mining, and then mining means a lot of energy requirement, a lot of water requirement. So energy footprint, water footprint, carbon emissions, and of all the negative effect that we're going to get. I'm not saying mining is totally bad, but we have to have proper balance. That's what we are talking about here. So huge increase in population, as you can see from earlier. This is in millions, so that's why 1,000 million. So you see basically a flat line. It's not really a flat line. It's not zero over there, because but the numbers is very, very small. And then we had this some event there is a slightly increase in the number, and then over last 200 years it has basically shoot up like anything. And with increase in population also came increase in urbanization. Now, why urbanization is important? Urbanization actually creates more stress. We have people living in a smaller area. One way it is good, but also it's what is happening is a lot of demand for water in that particular area. Then wastewater has to be treated. Waste that is managed has to be collected. So it becomes more for urban local bodies. It becomes more like complex, and with the development of all these what we call the slum areas, it becomes more and more difficult. So urbanization has its own demands. So as you can look from 1900s until 2030, almost 3 times, 2 out of every 10 people lived in urban area. 2030, 6 out of every 10 people will live in urban area. So more and more people moving to urban area, and that is creating a lot of like stress on resources too. Now, what happened? So with all these increase in population, a lot of activities, resource consumption, if you look at the global picture, global ecosystem, uh, which can be divided into 3 broad categories, which is the biogeophysical system, biodiversity, natural resources, we humans have impacted everything. So we humans have impacted all these different systems. You can see all those different parameters listed here, and they have all put in red. In red means each and every one of that has got some impact. Now, when we say impact, what does it? Like many of us are engineers, scientists, and all that. We want numbers, isn't it? So we like to see numbers. So how to calculate impact? So impact, if you look at any industrial ecology book, which is kind of basics of this circular economy and all these concepts, the impact is defined as population times affluence times technology. Now here population is, of course, what is the population of that particular country or particular area. Affluence is essentially GDP kind of calculation, like how affluent we are. More disposable income we have, more resources we will consume, more things we will buy, more waste we'll produce. And then the third part is the impact from the technology point. Now, population we know is going up. It is going up. It will go up, although the rate of growth is gone down, but still there is an increase. There will be increase in population. Affluence, we want it to go up. We want more and more people to have a better lifestyle, better like a disposable. They should have some disposable incomes, so they should have better lifestyle. We want them. So affluence has to go up. We want it to go up actually. Although in some in recent times we are seeing that in certain sections of society affluence is actually going down, and the other section is actually getting better. So anyway, that's a different debate altogether. But so then third part is the technology. Now, what does the technology really here means that? So here the technology, we have to, what we can do in terms of technology. So we have to play with this factor of technology in such a way so that we get impact going down. I just said population goes up, affluence goes up. So technology, if it remains even the same, what will happen? We will have more and more impact. So we need to bring the technology, more greener technology, more environmental friendly technology, which has lesser carbon footprint. So that's where this concept of life cycle assessment comes. Like when we're talking about lesser carbon footprint, how do we calculate? How do we know how much carbon footprint is there? And if there are two processes, three processes which we want to compare together, how to find out among these three processes which one will be actually better for the environment, actually will have better impact, like lower the impact, and by how much? There is a difference between qualitative and quantitative. Qualitative, when you have a feel that yes, it's good to do. For example, the discussion that you were having just before this module, that in terms of recycling, resource recovery, that's so when you do recycling, say if I take all the papers, if I do source segregation, I take all the papers, plastic, and I do recycling, how much good actually I'm doing to the environment? And at what point, say if I have to take that recyclable and make it travel 500, 600 kilometers, does it still make sense in terms of environmental footprint? Or is it better if I have a local waste incinerator, I can just put it in a waste incinerator, because that at least I'll do some resource recovery in terms of energy. So all these discussion, all these decisions can be taken, or many things which sounds very good, like we should go for it. But when you look at the actual figure, you will find out that probably it doesn't really is as good as we thought it is. So how to find those, so how to get those numbers, that's what this life cycle assessment is all about. So you already were discussing all that, so we'll skip a couple of these slides. So we use a lot of resources. We use almost more than 50 kg per person per day, and only 3 kg gets recycled. 21 is in use, so 21 plus 3 is 24, but rest is all going into the environment. So when it goes into the environment, it creates an ecological footprint. So when it creates an ecological footprint, basically what does that mean? Is basically it says that amount of land area and all the other resources required for us, like water required to produce sustainably the resources or ecological services needed to support a defined population at a set standard of living. So that's your ecological footprint. So based on how we live, how much land area is required and how much water is required to produce sustainably the resources that will be required for us, for our certain population. Now, depending on where you are, depending on your lifestyle, that's different and different. And this tries to take into account all the different activities, industrial, commercial, institutional, our day-to-day activity, every activity combined, it is looking at that. So if you look at, for example, Vancouver, which is a population of 1.7 million, ecological footprint is 19 times its area. So in Vancouver, the way people are living today, if you look at, try to have this lifestyle of that, you need 19 times of Vancouver to create that much of resource sustainably. So from Mother Nature, we can get whatever resources we can get on a yearly basis. We need 19 times area of Vancouver to create that resource so that the lifestyles can be supported. So what is happening today? They are, of course, they're getting resources from other places. Then it not only what is produced in Vancouver area, but also many other areas. The resources are like uh, extracted and then brought to Vancouver for its consumption. So it says that so that's we should try to reduce our ecological footprint as much as possible, because as the population goes up, we will have our Earth is shrinking. So when we say Earth is shrinking, means it's not that Earth is getting smaller. It's that the per capita like area land mass available to support the lifestyle per person is going down. So for Netherlands, it is 14 times in this area. Australia has one of the highest footprints of 6.25 hectares per person. Because see, Australia population is less, so in denominator you have very less number. So per person, less number at the bottom, the denominator, then of course total will be higher, isn't it? Denominator is smaller, so you will have the ratio will be bigger. So and Australia is a huge country. They have to maintain a like land. They have to maintain all those highways. They have to look at like the transportation sector, and then they have a lot of mining happening too. So when they have lots of mining happening, that also increases a lot of footprint, because mining requires a lot of water, a lot of energy, and all that. So you can calculate your own footprint too using that particular link at the bottom. Now, linking to this ecological footprint, there is a concept of what is known as Earth Overshoot Day. What does that? It says is that say if you can understand it. Let's if I give an example of, say, somebody is earning 12 lakhs a year. Okay, their salary is 12 lakhs. So in 12 lakhs a year, if I use all that money, say by the end of July or by the end of August, so what will happen? September, October, November, December, I have to borrow money, or I have to get to my reserves, my retirement saving or something or the other. I'm trying to get the money from there. So is that model really sustained? Like, is that model is good? Like, what will happen? I'll go bankrupt. If I do that on a date, like yearly, year to year basis, I'll go bankrupt. I'll not have any savings left. I'll not have any uh, money left for any future like emergencies and all that. So if you look at the similar concept here, what is happening is whatever resources that Mother Earth is producing, we are consuming that resource on a yearly basis. We are consuming that resources within only fraction or within a certain part of the year. So for the rest of the year, which is the red part here on top, which is your red part of the bar on top, for rest of the years, we are actually borrowing resources from our reserve. So that's again not a sustainable model, isn't it? It will create more and more problem as we progress. So as you can see earlier, from 1970 onwards, they have this figure. Earlier, it used to be the entire year. So up to December, end of December, so 1st of January. So it will, so whatever resources produced, we from Mother Earth on a yearly basis, renewable resources, we could use it. Now, as our population went up, our lifestyle changes. It became then it came to November, then it came to October, then September, August, and today we are actually looking at almost in July time frame. So as you can see here, we were actually close end of July. 29th of July precisely was the date for this year, and that was the same date in 2019 as well. In between, in 2020, as you can see over here, in 2020, there is a slight increase in that figure. We went up to August 22nd, if I remember correctly. And you can go to their website. This is if you look at Earth Overshoot Day, you can go to their website, and they have a lot of detailed information out there on that too. So, why this is here slightly increase in the number? Very very easy question. It is because of
pandemic.
There is like
yeah,
uh,
because of the pandemic. Since our activity
yes.
went down, so you saw that we could have actually slightly better in terms of we did slightly better in terms of Earth Overshoot Day. But when this lockdown kind of lifted up, and then the easing of lockdown, and the industry again kind of back up in 2021, we went back to the same. That's 2021, of course, is based on the prediction. So, but we are still we are July 29th is the date when we used all the resources that the Mother Earth could produce for us in the year of 2021. So now what we are doing is we are actually just trying to go into our reserves and use from there. So we have to do better. We talk about all these sustainable development and meeting the need of the present without compromising the ability of future generation to meet their own needs. So we have to do better. So when we start, and then there's the sustainable development goals, and there is where all the countries have made this like commitment that we will do all these things. If you go again towards the end, I will talk about some of the other resources that is available. Some of you who are interested can look at that, where we kind of talk about these in more detail. But in terms of sustainable development goals, if you look at many of these goals, for example, clean water and sanitation, affordable clean energy, you have sustainable cities, resource consumption and production, life below water, life on land, climate action, all these individual goals, they do relate to this concept of circular economy, life cycle, and all that. Smart cities of Government of India. Here also, if you look at the like a major program, waste management, energy management, urban mobility, water management, all these relates again to this big picture concept. So when we talk about the sustainable development, what is sustainability? What is that's always, many people gets confused between sustainability and durability. If something is more durable, we tend to say it is more sustainable, which is not really the true. It's not the true like definition of sustainability. Sustainability has, as I'm pretty sure you all know, that sustainability has essentially three pillars. One is environment, other is economy, and then is society. And it talks about, like, you will have human diversity, equity, quality of life, institutional structure, or political structure. If we are having too much of social unrest, if we are doing very good in terms of environment, we are very good in terms of economy, but having a lot of social unrest, a lot of issues going around, then it's again things are not, we don't call it a sustainable system, because if you have good environment and economy, that's a viable system. Good environment and society, that's a bearable system. You have a good impact on society and economy, that's an equitable system. But when all these three meets together, when it's bearable, viable, as well as equitable, then it becomes sustainable. So that's what the like a definition of sustainable systems or sustainability is all about. So when we talk about environment, materials, biodiversity, energy, and all that, economy, money, capital, employment, technological growth, investment, market forces, and all these three pillars are very, very important. Now, when we say life cycle assessment, it is essentially focused on environment part. There is another concept called life cycle costing that takes into consideration economy. Life cycle LCCA, life cycle costing assessment. And today we'll just focus on this part. Then there is a social LCA component there as well, that you can look at the impact on society. And that is becoming very, very important now. If you go for any international projects, especially global projects, in India also they've started asking it, but not that much now until now. But if you look at the global project, or even if, say, if you're submitting a big grant in US, or US is still a bit slightly low, but if you are in Canada or in Australia, New Zealand, of course, in Western European countries, US, it depends. If you are in California, it's different. If you are in Midwest, it's different. It's you, but they are asking for what benefit your grant will bring to the society, how much job it will create. That's the economy part there too. How it will impact the economy. What will be the long-term impact on society? How it will bring the disadvantaged people? What benefit it is there for minorities, for example? What benefit it has there for here? There's a lot of talk about Aboriginal people in Australia. When we were looking at in Australia, Aboriginal people. It's similar to our tribal people, for example, in India. How it is going to benefit the livelihood of lower strata of society. So those things are also, people are looking at these things. So in terms of life cycle, as the name suggests, life cycle. So we are starting as a small kid. You may have done life cycle of a honeybee, or life cycle of a toad, a frog. So there is a similar concept here. So we starting from the birth of any particular product or process or anything is what? Getting the raw material, extraction, acquisition. So that's your birth. So that's also called cradle. Cradle, because when the baby is born, we put it in a cradle. So that concept like the jhula, cradle is jhula. So that's from cradle to grave. That's the now we are saying not to grave. We are saying from cradle to cradle. In fact, there is a classical book on this very like good book. First, one of the first book done in this particular area. It's called Cradle to Cradle. Cradle to cradle means you start from the raw material. That's what and that was circular economy, isn't it? Cradle to cradle is circular economy. Although we didn't call it circular economy, that book was written almost 20 years ago. Now we are all these things, all these different phrases and other stuff, it gets repackaged. It's similar concept, or earlier some different name. In between, it disappears. Again, it comes back with the same name. And as one of the question was asked that yes, our practices, our ancient practices or other practices was much better. We are much environmental friendly. We are much circular actually in nature. Our activities compared to now. And now we are again trying to go back to circularity. Okay, so raw material acquisition, material processing, manufacturing, assembly, use, end of life. So that's your cradle to grave. Now the concept is not end of life. Let's bring it back and try to do the extraction of those resources at the end and bring it back to the economy. That's your circular economy. From linear, because what we have here is a linear. There is, but in circular, there is no waste. Of course, there cannot be like a zero waste. It's a concept. We try to move towards zero waste as less as possible. But so and then try to extract the resource and bring it back. Now, when we do that, what is its environmental footprint? Because whenever you try to do something, raw material acquisition, that has environmental footprint, material processing has environmental footprint, manufacturing has environmental footprint. You're using materials, you're using water, you're using energy. So what is the environmental footprint of any product? For example, if you have a cell phone, which all of us has a smartphone. Now, what is the carbon footprint of that smartphone? Now you have a different brands out there. You are an environmentally conscious person, and there is a Samsung. There could be a like a One Note, or there could be new Apple phone, and you are like, of course, you feel like that their performance is more or less the same. So if I want to find out which one has better environmental performance, which one is better for environment, how to find those out? So that's the whole concept of trying to get this life cycle. And if just to elaborate on that concept, say even for say this is talking about life cycle of a t-shirt, and you can do life cycle in different stages as well. You can do cradle to grave, you can do cradle to cradle, you can also do cradle to gate, and we'll talk about that. What does that mean? And sometimes you can also play with the system boundary, and will try to explain what a system boundary is to make some life cycle to look good or look bad. So whenever you look at a life cycle report, you have to be really careful to see how exactly it was done. Like what was the system boundary they chose? And we'll talk about in the example when we get there. So if you look at the life cycle of a t-shirt, from starting from eco design of the t-shirt, say design is getting done in some form in USA, then the raw material got extracted from Turkey. It could be from India too. We produce good quality cotton as well there in our country. Then we have a production. Say the production is happening in US, although these days most of the cotton production happens either in Bangladesh or in India. But just for example, they said that let's say production is happening in US, in the US factories, then it is get sold in a shop, and it gets exported to Europe. Then in Europe, somebody in France is using it, then it tosses it into the garbage, gets recycled, bring back into the system. Now, throughout this process, as you can see, there is a transport involved. There's a packaging involved. There is like you are having you use water, you use energy. When you produce this cotton, this could be fertilizers, the activity of humans, the machines. So there is a lot of and each one of those activity has certain input, certain output. So what this LCA does is essentially it is an environmental accounting exercise. like we do accounting for our any businesses and all that, like what is the whatever is our revenue in and whatever is the cost, and finally the what is the net, your revenue minus cost is gives you the whatever the money you are making. So similarly here, what are all the input into the system and what is all the output of the system? And looking at the input and output, we try to come up with a number, and in few slides down you will start seeing how it is actually done. So, and it's all relates to this design for sustainability, sustainable engineering, design for environment, sustainable design. So all those things are different terms, but they mean the same thing. It's basically to design, create, consume, substantially to we do things to do that. So how to do in a better way, how to look at to entire environmental considerations, and not only talk about just the carbon footprint or water footprint, but the entire environmental footprint. And that's what in LCA you can do. So how you go about doing an LCA? Like what is so you'll have to look at the different stages. So starting from the concept, the material extraction, manufacturing, pocket packaging, transport, retail use. If you may have to do cleaning sometimes as well in between if you're using certain product, disposal, recycling. So 7 and 6 has got interchanged there. Recycling, then disposal. So this is all. So all these different processes needs to be captured. So whenever we try to do that, it has to be have a it has to be done in a scientific way. It has to follow a certain method. Otherwise, what will happen? I do LCA in a certain way, you do LCA in a certain some different way, somebody else does LCA in certain different way. We cannot compare our results because it will not be apple to apple comparisons. So we have to follow a certain standard methods, like we do standard methods for most of our environmental analysis anyway. So it's there is why there is an ISO standard. So there is an ISO standard that we use for it. It's a technique for assessing environmental aspects, a potential impact associated with a product, system, or service. And it says they have to have a systems thinking rather than having silos thinking. They only think in a particular way, but don't look at the other things associated with that. It does not really solve the problem. And I'll show you an example right now how what exactly I mean. What can be done with LCA? We can make better decision, better, more informed decision in terms of environment, in terms of communication, labeling, product declaration, learning, exploration, like try to find out, say if I'm a company, I want to make my product more environmental friendly, because there is a market now. There is a market now which wants environmental friendly products. And also it will help me reduce my liability for later on. Say if I have too much of heavy metals and other things in my product, later on if it becomes it starts creating environmental contamination, then as part of see these days there is also EPR and other concept. So extended producer responsibility is there. So based on all those, we will, the companies will be liable for their own product. So to reduce the liability also, they can go for this. They can learn, they can explore, research, and all those can be done in terms of trying to better environmental footprint. Now, when we go for this, as you saw just for the T-shirt example, there were different steps. Every step has material input, energy input, water, and every step has certain emissions coming out. In between, you have transportations as well. So it becomes, even for as you will see in the example, even for a very simple stuff, it gets really quite big in terms of getting those LCA organized. So that's the reason why we have some certain softwares. There are softwares available which you can use to do life cycle analysis. OpenLCA is a free software. It's like a open source that is available there on YouTube. You have videos also to how to use OpenLCA. LCA calculator, it is online. It can be used for free for 14 days. CIMA Pro is one of the most popular software. It's actually the most popular software in terms of a life cycle assessment. But there is a education version which you can download, like a student version, but it's only limited. But if you want to do a like a real LCA, if you have projects on LCA, you have to buy this software. And then when you in the software, it also comes with a database. We'll talk about database. Don't worry too much about right now. We'll talk about database in a minute. Now, just to again try to, I from time to time I try to bring you back like why we are discussing all this. Otherwise, this why question is very, very important. Otherwise, people start losing focus. Like, what is the whole purpose? So why we are talking about this LCA, how the LCA will be beneficial. Just look at this example here. On the top, this gentleman is feeling so dirty because he's a diesel car and he's doing all these emissions getting out. So he goes and buys an electric vehicle. Now, like we all are talking about electric vehicle these days. So he brings this electric vehicle and he's driving it, not no emissions on the road, and he feels so clean. But what is happening here? This electric vehicles require charging. Charge requires energy. Energy needs to come from somewhere. In a country like India, or in our country, we have nearly 65 to 70% energy coming from coal. We all know that just 10 days ago, 7 days ago, there was this coal crisis, or there was some coal shortage, I will call, not coal crisis as such, because the coal was a bit like low with all those different coal-based thermal power plants. So there was some panic that we may have some power cuts and all that. But anyway, I think things seems to be getting back in normal. So we did not see much things happening, although there were some power cuts in some part of the country, but more or less it was okay. So it's so what will, if it's coal is the major source of energy, and coal-based thermal power plant creates all these emissions in the background. So what is happening? Did we really solve the problem, or we just shifted the problem? To some extent, we can say we have also solved the problem partly, because the emissions that will happen nearer, say if it's this emissions are happening nearer to the population, it will create more negative impact on health and all that. So we have actually moved that pollution away a little bit, but ultimately this pollution will come back because it's a global phenomenon. Things will move around, it will come back. So we did not really solve the problem. We have done some localized like impact, localized positive impact, but that if you look at the big picture environmental impact on the global scale, it's just shifting of the problem rather than solving of the problem. And don't forget that electric vehicles requires batteries, and that batteries uses a lot of rare earth metals. A lot of critical materials are used, and those rare earth and critical materials are very difficult to mine today. So that also has a huge environmental footprint there too. And we are not, if you don't recycle those batteries, if you don't do the resource recovery from of these heavy metals, rare earth metals, that means we are adding more burden to environmental footprint. So so to make this, say, if the Indian government goes for overnight switching from all this, say tomorrow if there is some rule which says that we will not use this gasoline, petrol, diesel vehicle, and let's move entirely to electric vehicle. If electric vehicle is available, of course, uh, is it really good for environment? How do we know? So we need a exercise like life cycle assessment to really find out whether it's really good for the environment or not, and at what kind of energy mix it will be really good for the environment. One of my master's students did some preliminary work on that, where we found that we need at least 65 to 70% renewables. Right now we are 65 to 70% coal. We have to move from coal and go to renewables, and do at least 65 to 70% coming from solar, or like a wind, hydroelectric and all that. Then only it will make then only it will be actually good for the environment. So moving from gasoline vehicle to the electric vehicle. So, but that calculation will only come, and so that I always advocate for science-based policy making. Many times we make policy on emotions. We don't make on based on science. So like there is a craze of electric vehicle, let's go for electric vehicle. I'm not against electric vehicle, but what I'm saying is, unless we fix our energy sector, and we are working on fixing our energy sector too, so that is a positive side there too. We are fixing on like we are going renewable, but we have to really step up on that, and then only we will have a real benefit of these showing up. So I guess that kind of makes you aware that why do we need to even try to learn this stuff. So say for example, now if you start comparing very simple products as well, like we were talking about energy systems, now let's bring it to the product scale. Simple, these two products, what's better? Typically, if you look at you are having this reusable coffee mug, or you are using this use and throw coffee mug every time. So of course you will say this like a renewable coffee mug is better, isn't it? That's but when you do the life cycle assessment, will you compare one of this versus one of that? Because we have to do comparisons. So should we compare one this coffee mug versus one reusable this? Will it be
Shouldn't
fair
you
for?
compare multiple usage time?
Yes, yeah, that's what I was. Because if you use one, of course, this will lose, isn't it? It requires more material to build. It requires more energy to build. Probably more water got consumed here. But this you can use for n number of times. You can use it multiple user of time. Versus this only you can use once. Like sometimes in university hostels, people may use it more than once, but typically it should be used for only once. So that's so if I compare one of these versus one of that and do LCA, this guys will lose. This item will lose because of course it will have a higher environmental footprint. So as one of you suggested, that that's not fair, isn't it? That we have to compare for is for its multiple usage. So that's called that there is a terminology called function and functional unit. Now, what is the function of these two? Is to actually make us have our drink, coffee, tree, and all that. So we can use these containers to have the drink. Now, the function is to provide a method, provide a mode, like a tool to have our beverage, whatever beverage we want. So now, functional unit is how much time that beverage consumption we are talking about. Are we talking about for a month? So if you're talking about for a month, say if we take 2 coffee a day, so you are using 60 of this. And so if you're using it for this for a month, so you use it once, and then of course you have to clean it. If I'm saying that 60 here, so you have to clean it 59 times. So when you clean it, there is water. If you're using hot water, there is also there energy. You have used detergent, so those things are also there. So you have to take that into factor into consideration. So what has been found, there is some research out there which you may have also seen it. If you use this material for at least 28, 29 times, so if you buy this material, use it for 2-3 days, and then keep on losing it and don't use it, and then you go back here, you're not really doing anything good for the environment. In fact, you are adding burden to the environment. If you're using it 28, 29 times, after that, this starts showing actually positive impact on environment compared to that. Because the amount of energy and like environmental footprint, which is to make this, is of course much higher than this guy. So that's, of course, this is better, but at the same time, you have to use it at least 28, 29 times. Then only it starts showing positive impact, or like real positive impact. These two we all know. This guy is better. Now we should have a LED bulb also. LED is even better than that. But the question is, how much better? When we move from here to here, this guy was costly. And now when we move from here to LED, LED is also costly. So for a person who is looking at his, he wants to do better for the environment. But see, everybody has limited budget. With the cost of living going up, the way our right now in India or like in other countries, it's right. I'm in US presently. I'm actually talking to you from US, so it's early morning here. So that gasoline price have gone up here as well, but not as high rate as this is happening in back home. So everybody has limited budget, and with the cost of living going up, inflation going up, we always look at, okay, so if I want to do good for environment, but I have to look at my purse, my wallet too. So yeah, I've to spend too much money here. So, but I really want to know, is it really good for environment? How much it is good for environment? So those kind of calculation we can do, and this example will take in more detail. I don't know whether you have. I have already emailed the set of slides yesterday, so I don't know whether it was passed to you before lecture today or not. I guess you will get it at some point of time. So in case of these two, which one is better? This is very interesting stuff. So if those of us who are slightly older, if you remember how this plastic bag came actually at the first place. Plastic bags came to save the environment. Sounds very weird today, isn't it? The plastic bag, if you go back to the old, in the YouTube also, you can dig through the old advertisements, and they say that let's save the environment, let's save our trees. And to save our tree, we have to get away from paper bags, because paper means we are cutting down the trees, we are cutting down our forest. Let's move to plastic. because it's more durable. It can be used multiple times, and it can be it doesn't go bad. Paper, you can put even wet stuff here. Wet stuff doesn't work with this. It can be made airtight as well. So there are a lot of advantages of plastic. So think about sugar, salt, and other stuff. The way sugar and salt are packed in those airtight plastic bags today, that if the plastic bag is not there during this monsoon time, all this sugar, if you're in Bombay or some places that rainy season, all the what the sugar will become like a clumpy stuff. It will become very wet. Same thing will happen with salt and many other products too. So this plastic packaging we keep is actually also help in a positive way too. It's not that it's all negative. So, and but today what is happening, we want to go away from plastic, and there is a reason for that. I'm not saying it's a wrong decision. There is a reason for that. We have to get away from the single-use plastic. But how much environmental benefit we are actually going to get by going back to paper, or going, what are the alternatives coming? So how to compare whether the alternative is good and how good it is? excuse me. So that's so that kind of comparison requires LCA. In terms of plastic, there is a lot of debate on that. See, plastic as a material is not really that bad. The main problem with plastic is improper management of plastic waste. And we can debate on that later on if you want. Some of you may not agree with me on that, but that's okay. That it's improper management of plastic waste is a major problem. If we manage our plastic waste properly, other than those single-use plastic, this kind of thin bags and other stuff which we should not use, but other plastic products actually have done a lot of good. Look at the cars today. Cars have become lighter. The mileage has gone up. We are using less petrol for more, and we're traveling more miles, more kilometers, and because of the lighter vehicle. And the lighter vehicle is using a lot of plastics. So actually, it is actually doing environmental good there. So there could be a lot of examples there as well. These two, let's just skip it. This, of course, Hummer is not that popular in India. So one of the first LCA study, we'll go a little bit faster here now. It's one of the first LCA study which was done, although it was not called LCA, was actually done by Coca-Cola in 1969, long back. So Coca-Cola company came up with this study. Of course, they didn't know what is LCA at that particular time, so they didn't call it LCA. But they were trying to find out if they want to produce plastic. They wanted to produce plastic bottles in their own factory, so that will reduce the need for transportation. This was more from an economics point of view. They did this study, and lower weight of plastic bottle would reduce the energy needed to sip the bottles as well. So see, when we moved from glass to plastic, there were some positives there too. Glass is heavier, more breakable, so you can use plastic. Plastic, there will be less wastage. At that time, plastic was easier to recycle than glass as well. Based on this, PET bottle was easier to recycle for them. So they did this study and they found that actually it's better for them to move from glass bottles to plastic bottles. And that's why you see these days more plastic bottles, less glass bottles. Although some glass has come back again, gradually it has come back to some extent, but still you will see more and more plastic bottles being used. So in terms of LCA, this is the standard definition. It's a compilation and evaluation of input, output, potential environmental impact of the product system. What it does, it's environmental profile. There is an ISO method. So what can be done? You can use for product development. You can use for planning. You can do for public policy. You can do it for marketing and eco declarations and all that. So this is a standard method for LCA. There are 4 stages: goal and scope definition, inventory, impact analysis, and then interpretation. So goal means what is the purpose of LCA, who is the audience, what you want to do, what is the unit selection, where in the world we are talking about this, what is the energy mix there. Energy mix plays a very major role, and getting all those data, energy, material in, and what is coming out. So one of the most complex part of LCA is getting this inventory analysis, getting data. And in Indian context, since LCA is not that popular, is still today, we don't, getting data is very difficult, because many times our industry does not collect the data in the way you will need in terms of doing a proper LCA. So you may have to do a lot of guesstimates as well. Impact analysis, so you got all these data, you used all those like databases, you did the LCA, you run that software, you got those emissions numbers, so what? So what does that mean? So we have to try to understand that as well. We'll talk about it. And then what is in terms of impact analysis, those are those different like global warming, acidification, eutrophication, those things. But what is next? How to interpret it? How is it really bad for the environment? What is the negative impact on human health? So those things comes under interpretation. So this is a very, very important slide for this concept. So from raw material acquisition, material processing, manufacture, assembly, use and service, retirement, recovery, treatment, and disposal. So from each step, what is the material energy input and what is the waste coming out? When we're talking about waste, it could be solid waste, liquid waste, gaseous waste, any waste that is coming out. In between, there are some other things happening, remanufacture, reuse, and all those, so we can take those into consideration. So this is entire from cradle to grave, this whole concept of we have to take the material energy input, output, and waste output coming out there from there. So LCA, as I said, Coca-Cola company developed it, and then a lot of things, nothing really happened until 1984. And then in Switzerland, they were looking at this packaging. They found that lots of packaging happening. So what is the environmental impact of all this packaging? So that's where it started, Environmental Report on Packaging Switzerland, where this concept of LCA, as we know today, kind of started. Then CTAC got involved, Society of Environmental Toxicology and Chemistry. Then this journal, Life Cycle Assessment Journal, started coming up. ISO standard came. Now there is a lot of things. We have a social LCA guideline. There is a European LCA platform. EcoInvent Center, which tries to collect data from around the world for all these different unit processes. You can find data from EcoInvent. If you have CIMAPRO software, you get access to EcoInvent as part of the software package. Then today, there is this initiative, life cycle initiative between UNEP, different organizations, and CTAC. We have all come together, and we are trying to work on LCA together, trying to make it more usable and more kind of useful as well. So goal and scope is what is the purpose of LCA? Who is the audience? Here inventory, we talked about the function and functional unit. Function was what that product is giving you the function. Functional unit is you need to, for example, in that case, we said what? 1 month of serving of beverage. So that's a functional unit. Now, what are the boundaries? Are we talking about production of those two and then use as well as the disposal? Or as we're talking about just what is happening in a factory setting, we are not worried about what happens after factory setting. So those are your boundaries. That's your system boundaries. Then what kind of data you will be required? What assumptions are you making? So what are the limitations? All those things kind of goes under inventory analysis. Then impact assessment, what are the environmental, social, and economic? Here we talk more on environment. Then interpretation, like how to take that information to reduce environmental impact. What conclusion can be drawn? What recommendations can be made? So those are the ways it is done. So let's look at some few simple examples and then one detailed example. For example, this one, comparisons of two ways of writing in the classroom. We have all used this mechanical pencil. These days, mechanical pencils are there versus wooden pencil. Remember that Nataraj? These days, we don't get that ad. Nataraj Fir Hua champion. So, but Nataraj is actually not. Still, you can buy, I think, Nataraj pencil there. But that's the wooden pencil I'm talking about. Then mechanical one is where you have the lid is in the middle and you can just use it as we used to call dot pen that and then it works like that. There is a spring there as well. So for wooden pencil, even for as simple as a wooden pencil, you have to get lumber from the forest. It will go to the lumber mill, then the transportation involved. Then there will be manufacturing of it. Then the rubber, which is used as a eraser, graphite in the middle, packaging of this, brass, which is at the bottom. At the end, you have, as you can see in this picture as well, at the end, you have this brass which holds the eraser there. So that's, and then for each of these material will come from different sources. So there is a lot of transportation involved. And everything comes here and manufacturing done. Then it goes to the retailer. Then it comes to the use. In use, you have to sharpen. Sharpen, you need a sharpener. So you can, these days, there is also electric sharpener, which you can see the picture over here, although the small animation which is going on the slide, that's talking about electric sharpener. So that's, although it doesn't go inside, unfortunately, this animation is slightly wrong. Pencil doesn't go inside that. Actually, pencil comes back out after sharpener. Sharpening is done. But if you are using the traditional sharpener, the plastic one or the metal one, so what is the environmental footprint of that as well? So if you're using electric sharpener, what is the source of energy for this electric sharpener? how much long you can use this electric sharpener. So all those things. So think about it, as simple as a pencil, things can get really complex. And so you can start from a Excel spreadsheet, but at some point of time, it will become too much. And then you need to use some of one of these software to detail LCA. And then finally, end of life. So that's your wooden pencil. Now, if you go to mechanical pencil, you use plastic. Mostly we use plastic, polyethylene, polypropylene, plastic polymers for the body. So you have your oil and polyethylene, polypropylene. Of course, eraser is also there. Graphite is also there. And you use the graphite one. Packaging will also be there. And then here they use a spring because just as I said, to make it work, use a spring. And again, for all of these, again, transportation, manufacture, retail, use, end of life here as well. So now if I have to compare these two, if I have to compare mechanical pencil versus wooden pencil, is it really fair to compare one mechanical pencil versus one wooden pencil? Again, the answer is no, isn't it? Because it will, wooden pencil doesn't last that long. Mechanical pencil will last for a very long time. Mechanical pencil, of course, will lose if you put a one versus one comparison. So we have to look at what is the function of it. The function is to write. Now we have to put a functional unit to it. So how much writing? Can we say 1 year of writing in a classroom for all the kids? For one kid in a classroom for 1 year, whether he's using mechanical pencil versus. So we have to give the same level playing field for both the product or process. We cannot have the different level playing field. Then we are not really comparing apple to apples. We have to make the same level playing field. So we can say, okay, 1 year of writing or 1 month of writing for a class 10 student in certain setting. And so how much wooden pencil is used versus how much mechanical pencil is used. What is the typical life of the mechanical pencil? So you have to get all those information and then do the comparison. So and things gets really complex. So especially if another example, I'll tell you the ebook versus physical book. Now, physical book, you can read only one book at a time. You have an e-reader, you can put maybe for 50, 100, 200 books there. Now, if you have an iPad, which you use as an e-reader as well, now how to compare? Because iPad has several other functions too. So things really get complex when you try to do that. So that's why we kind of make use of some of these analytical or software tool. So function is service provided by a system, what it does. Functional unit is give the functional a number value. I think we have talked about 2 examples. Here the function is writing. We can say 1 meter of writing, 100 meter of writing, 10,000 meters of writing, but it has to be same for both wooden pencil versus mechanical pencil. Input is energy, material, labor. Output is all those emissions coming out. The data. That's very, very important component of getting good quality data, which we find kind of lacking in most of the places. So time sensitive data for last 5 years because the technology keeps on changing. Geographical as well, like what kind of technology is being used there. Best available technology, it should be representative data, consistent data, reproducible data. So data quality, data precision, data completeness, those are all very, very important. In one of the meeting we were talking about LCA, and one gentleman was asked this question what is 3 major challenges in life cycle analysis. His answer was data, data, and data. So to get good quality, if you get good quality data, your LCI life cycle inventory is done. And once your life cycle inventory is done, good inventory is done, rest is all, it's a process. It's basically some calculations. And you can do that either using software or using Excel spreadsheet. But if you don't have good quality data, it becomes very difficult. And having bad data is actually, in my view, having bad data is worse than having no data. Because if you have bad data, everything falls apart. Because you think that you have data, you work on that data. If you have no data, you will at least try to collect some data. And hopefully you will collect good quality data. Anyway, so once you have all these emissions figure coming out, you can relate those emissions to different impacts. So global warming potential, abiotic depletion, consumption of non-living, human toxicity potential, land use impact, eutrophication, acidification, and all those different impacts which is out there. So there is a document called IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. I think you may have heard about that. You should have. If not, you should go to their website. You can download their reports. They talk about all these different impact categories in great detail over there. I have already shown you a few of them. There is a lot of others out there too. And so there, the discussion is like what in terms of what emissions causes what kind of impact, the basic science about it, how the impact is calculated. But we take the 100 years of a timeline. So all those discussion is included in that IPCC document. You can find it other top places too, but that's a good place to find all this like information. So once you have all these emissions coming out, once you get all these impact like eutrophication or acidification and all that, so what is the purpose? What can we do? So as a scientist, we can make recommendation of choice. We can use that particular impact, focus on solution. Can we reduce environmental impact? Can we come up with a better, greener material which will reduce environmental impact? We can take a closer look and look at how to make the difference. So let's look at this detailed example now, slightly more detail, which again kind of make you understand it even better, I hope. So this, I said, I told you earlier that we'll use this example. So a compact fluorescent versus incandescent. Today you may say that let's get rid of incandescent, put a LED bulb, and let's do the comparison there too. That's you can do it as an exercise. Try to do that. You can follow the same similar steps. So we know that compact fluorescent is better than incandescent, but how much better? How much better is it? Than incandescent bulb? So how to do that? So as I said, LCA 4-step: goal and scope, life cycle inventory, impact, and interpretation. So and then what LCA does, you start from resource acquisition all the way to end of life, or even back to the economy. And then throughout the process, you're looking at manufacturing, distribution, use, end of life. And during each of these life cycle stages, there is an impact on Mother Earth. For whatever we do, there is an impact on Mother Earth. So in LCA, what we do is we actually try to get all these impacts together and club them together and then try to put it holistically. So what is the impact coming? So that's kind of helps us to avoid the mistakes. For example, that electric vehicle versus gasoline vehicle you saw, we are only we are looking at only vehicular emissions on the road, but that's only one part of the problem. The emissions coming from the power plant, the emissions coming from the manufacturing of those batteries, that is also needs to be looked into. So that's a holistic, try to have a holistic approach there. So life cycle of a light bulb. So this, you have this incandescent bulb. So manufacture, you use glass, tungsten, copper, steel, aluminum, argon, electric components, plastic, mercury, phosphorus, all those different things you have to goes there just to have a simple bulb. Then resource acquisition, extraction and transformation for all these particular material. Then after it's done, you will package it, you will distribute that. It again, transportation involved. Then it will get used. While using, you are using electricity as well. So here, what kind of electricity? It is coal-based thermal power plant, or it is a renewable energy. So that is also, and that's why that is important, because the efficiency of these two products are different. The amount of light you will get from these two products are different, and amount of energy usage per unit light provided is also different. So that's why we have to look at the energy mix too. So that's your energy, then end of life. What is happening at the end of life when the bulb goes bad? Is it getting recycled? Is it bringing back to we are doing some resource recovery, or we are just putting it in a landfill, or we are putting it in an incinerator? So how it is getting rid of? So end of life. So this entire stage, if you take the entire stage, as you can see under this dotted line here, that's called system boundary, and that's your cradle to grave system boundary. If I want to stop at cradle to gate, what I will do is I'll just stop right here at this middle. I assume that you can see my pointer. So right after manufacturing, I'll stop here because I don't know what happens after that. So as an industry, say if I'm making bulb, if I'm Philips or Lakshman Sylvania or whatever, we don't get the ad for Lakshman Sylvania that much today. Earlier, Asrani used to come. Those of you who are very young probably doesn't remember that. But Asrani used to come and say, "Pure ghar ke badal dalunga," that Lakshman Sylvania bulb. And so anyway, so there was. So if I'm a manufacturer of this bulb, I will say my control is only up to this point. Then I'm just giving into the economy. I don't know what happens after that. So I'll just stop here. So if you stop here and you don't include the disposal part, anything which contains mercury and all, which is actually it will the negative impact of mercury and all those will not get captured when we just impact if we just stop here, because that becomes more problematic at the end of life, because when this mercury gets disposed into the environment and creates all sorts of problems. So whenever you look at a LCA study, look at the system boundary very carefully. Like what was their system boundary? Because I can make something look, as I said earlier, I can make this a bulb look good if I stop here and don't include like a disposal pod. So that's so you have to be really careful when you look at a LCA study. Now, if you look at the bulb, what is the function of the bulb? Is to provide light. Uh, the fluorescent CFLs or LED also creates a very good ambience. You go to any shari shop or a chudi shop and all that, or any shop where you will see a lot of LEDs and CFLs are put there. Everything looks so shiny. Yeah. So that creates a ambience there too. But how to capture that ambience in a quantitative way? Very difficult. There are ways to do it, but we'll not go there today. So in LCA, what we do an accounting exercise. We try to do environmental impact in terms of what is the disturbance to natural cycle, what is the environmental intervention, and then we'll try to do the accounting. So coming here, we have resource acquisition, manufacturing, distribution, use, and end of life of these two bulbs. We have to look at what are the inputs coming in. We'll look at what are the outputs coming out, and then we will do it for a functional unit. For all the input and output will be related to the same functional unit for these two bulbs. And the function is to provide light. So as we can see here, the function is to provide light. Will not go into the secondary function. We'll just work on primary function. So these two products we're trying to compare. So if you have to do LCA, this is how you need to go about. These two products you need to compare, incandescent bulb and CFL, for example. So what is its primary function? Is to provide light. There could be secondary function like heating. Your incandescent bulb actually creates more heat. So some of the poultry farms where they want things to be warmer, they still use incandescent bulb. They don't go for CFL because incandescent creates a more warmth, warmer environment, and that's good for poultry farms. And then also creates an ambience, which we just talked about. So now, if its primary function is lighting, let's focus on that only. We'll not worry about this for now. Although if you do a detailed LCA at some point in your career, if you are looking at, sometimes you have to take some secondary function also, and you have to do some allocation of resources. And there again, it becomes a lot of subjectivity too, unless you are very, very familiar with how this industry works. So in terms of products, like these two products, what is the functional unit now? Function is to provide light. So what should be the functional unit? So we said that let's take providing 700 lumens for 10,000 hours. Now, why we pick this number is, you will see in a minute, what we call reference flow. Reference flow is how much of that material will be required, or the product will be required to get the amount which is needed for the functional unit. So when I say providing 700 lumens for 10,000 hours, we need 10 bulbs, 10 incandescent bulbs to provide this, and 600 kilowatt hour of electricity to provide that. And for CFL, only one bulb is good enough at 14 kilowatt hour of electricity. So that's the reason I put 710,000 hours, because it gives me a nice 1 bulb and 10 bulb. So my calculation becomes easier. So, but so it will, to provide this function, I would need 10 bulbs of incandescent as opposed to 1 bulb of CFL. So I'll do all my data collection for 1 bulb of CFL. I'll do the data collection for 10 bulbs of incandescent, and then I'll compare that all the emissions coming out and all the different impact categories, and that's how we get like a life cycle, all those graphs that you see. That's what the software does actually. And then you can also look at the lifetime watt level human ratio in terms of all that. That's okay. So what the software does, or based on your input. So in terms of, you have to go for inventory. So if you look at the lighting needs, we have the glass, this bulb, we need cardboard, it needs electricity for charging, and functional unit was 700 lumens for 10,000 hours, and we say 1 and 10. So we have to collect data. So now data collected, this data has to be collected by analyst in terms of They're based on your process, based on your different process. Although we do have data now, so if you want one cubic meter of concrete, or 1 cubic meter, or like if you want 1 ton of certain material, data is available these days. You can use the data from the databases. But you need to be careful with the database to make sure that it's a relevant database. It mimics the condition. Like for if it's India, we should have database relevant to India. That's what we should use. So in terms of reference flow, we have 700 lumens for 10,000 hours. That's what we need. So for that, we need 10 bulbs versus 1 bulb. So for 10 bulbs, you need 228 grams of glass. To make 10 incandescent bulb, you need 228 grams of glass. You need 232 grams of cardboard to put it in the box for packaging. And you will use 600 kilowatt hour of electricity during its use to provide you 700 lumens for 10,000 hours. So that to make this glass, so we look at, okay, so we need glass. So what is the like a environmental profile of glass making, because that's what we'll require. So these are called unit process, because we're looking at 1 kg, 1 kg or 1 kilowatt hour. So they are called unit process. So unitary method. So 1 kg of glass. To again, then we have, what are the inputs? Inputs is 94 grams of crude oil, 1 gram of iron ore, 1300 liters of water. And this list is not complete. We have just put the 3 main common list here, and we'll use the same material for others too. But if you can, this list is not complete. It's not exhaustive. You will have long list of input and long list of output coming out. In terms of output emissions, 0.52 kg of CO2, 0.26 gram of particulate matter, 2.5, 1.6 milligrams of benzene, and there could be a lot of other outputs coming out too in terms of emissions. So for 1 kg of cardboard, similar numbers can be got. For 1 kilowatt of hour of electricity, and this is for coal-based thermal power plant. For 1 kilowatt hour, we use 19,000 liters of water. That's why we say that water. Like we need to make sure the water is available. Otherwise, we even cannot have energy. So, so this cardboard, 1 kg of cardboard uses 3,200 liters of water. So 77 grams of crude oil, 16 grams of iron ore. So for all of these, we're using the same parameter just for comparison purpose. But when you go, there are a lot of other parameters there too. And some parameters could be more important than the others for different material out there. And then similarly, emissions, CO2, PM 2.5. And so this is for 1 kg. We need it for 228 grams, 232 grams. So what we'll do, if it's 1 kg for this, how much for 232? So we just do a linear unitary method. So per functional unit, we call it per functional unit. So for 228 grams of glass, we can just calculate for 1 kg it is this much. So how much is for 228? So same numbers. We are assuming that there is a like we can use a linear relationship here. And then same thing with cardboard, same thing with energy as well. So this is the kind of data that you are actually getting from those databases, and that's what does the calculation. So once you have these emissions coming out, outputs coming out, then you can compare to that what I told you, those IPCC like models and calculations, and then you can come up with this different impact, like whether greenhouse gas, abiotic depletion, acidification, eutrophication, so all those. But and good thing for you is that the software already has all those things built in. But software is a software. So it's we as a user of the software, we should have understanding of what software is actually doing it. Then you can interpret it better. So once you have all these output coming out, so inventory may have hundreds of different elementary flow. You're looking at all those different stuff. You can have hundreds of elementary flow, very hard to interpret. Our brain can simultaneously consider all these up to 7 independent parameters. So we have to stop at some point. And this data, so in terms of database, different organizations in Europe have come together and made a central database, which has been taken, which is now the EcoInvent. And the EcoInvent is working on getting data from around the world. So there are now databases from different places. So once you have this LCI result, you have this impact categories. We call it midpoint impact. From the midpoint impact, which is again based on the IPCC document, you go to the endpoint impact, which is your reduce. IPCC document is one document, but there could be a lot of other things there as well. Then you have your endpoints in terms of whether reduced resource use, extension of a species, respiratory disease, and all that, seawater level, cancer. So this is what we are, and then finally, when we can take it to a final number. So after doing the LCA, we can get this information. We can use that for eco design, strategy development, product declaration, benchmarking, life cycle costing. So all those information the LCA experts could use for better design, better product management, and also environmental, material, and safety. So those can be done as well. So then, say with the impact categories, you have this single score, and the single score is very similar to what say, for example, your Bombay Stock Exchange score that you get. When you see that the stock exchange going up and down, it doesn't really mean that all the companies are doing good or all the companies are doing bad. So based on these different impact categories, we come up with single score. That single score is important, say when you're talking to a policy maker. If you go and tell them all these impact categories, they don't really understand, they will not understand that. But if you come up with a single score and tell that overall, yes, this is like this is how much it is good, how much it is bad, then it makes more sense to them. So that's what we're talking about. And there are different impact categories based on that. There is a combined approach in terms of human health. So let's go a little bit faster. So you have this interpretation, and that's how you finally come up with life cycle. So in terms of its application, you can find several industries that started using life cycle. It's still a bit slow in India, I would say, but there is a use of LCAs coming in. A lot of discussion happens on that too. And there are the use of LCA has been done in other applications. For example, here we were talking about organics, resource recovery of organics. It produces the smell. So if you have to put together a order control technologies, which one is better? So we did this certain comparisons. We looked at the environmental impact using LCA, ranked them. Environmental impact is just one aspect. If you look at the industry scale, you also have to look at the cost. You also have to look at the systems operation. So we ranked everything together, and then you take the one which works the best. Similarly, the other one here, we all use goes to airport and other stuff, malls. So there is a hand dryer which you use in the in your what we say in your restroom, washrooms, and then you can also have a roll paper towel. So you can compare which one is better based on whether you should go for